Welcome, everybody. We're going to begin the meeting. I know that you are all surprised to see this face up here.
You don't look
Probably
like
not as
Alice.
pleasantly surprised.
You don't look like Alice Erwin.
Yes, well, might be thinking it's Alice, but it isn't. Alice and Wendy are both called away on personal issues and couldn't make it tonight. So they asked me or more or less insisted that I chair. the meeting. So here I am. Richard Corman, and I'm chairing the Environmental Protection Committee meeting. So we have one item on the agenda tonight, and happy to introduce Max from Councilmember Marte's office to talk about a bill related to air quality and protection of air quality. And we're going to see if we can get to a resolution tonight, if at all possible, if we reach quorum and consensus. So with that, I turn it over to Max, and thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. Try and keep it easy for you tonight, Richard. But yeah, so I'm here to discuss the intro 107 in the council that I think as Richard mentioned is gonna have a hearing on the 28th, right? And so I guess I'll start just with the brief background on the bill. And so it's introduced by Councilmember Alexa Vilas a year or two ago, but it's actually was originally introduced by Antonio Reynoso, who's now the borough president, Brooklyn Borough President, when he was a council member. It didn't really gain much traction there. And so then kind of the way it works is after the previous council, any leftover bills that are still there, in the new council members can kind of take them. And so, yeah, so Alexa Vilas took it. So again, I spoke with her office. They're not entirely sure why the borough president created this bill, but kind of why they wanted to really get something on air quality monitoring for their district is that they have by kind of Sunset Park, Red Hook, they have the BQE, they have the Bruceport, they have a lot of these, what we call the last mile deliveries, which is where a lot of these like Amazon warehouses where when you order something on Amazon, they all get sent to these warehouses in the district. And then you have these giant trucks taking them out, day in, day out. So they have a lot of air quality concerns. So they bring this bill. And basically it's fairly straightforward. I'm going to require the Department of Environmental Protection to basically work with the DOT and other kind of, and I think also the state DOT and the New York Metropolitan Transportation Council, and really any kind of transportation group or planning group to get the data on any what's called a heavy use thoroughfare. So that's any highway, roadway, traffic corridor, basically any road in the city that has over 100,000 vehicles on a yearly basis. And so it would require that, right? I'll use Canal Street as like the example because I think that's a really easy to visualize, right? Kind of like each side of the city. It would need at least 2 air quality monitors on these thoroughfares. So, right, that could mean on Canal Street, which definitely gets 100,000 a year, right? It could mean one on Canal and right 6th and one on Canal and Broadway. Theoretically, they can also do more than 2, but it would just mean that 2 air quality monitors throughout that entire thoroughfare. And then again, the dates here are off because it was introduced a while back. So once it has a hearing, it'll be amended to reflect our current timeline. But yeah, basically it's kind of a 3-year phase process where first the department has to work to find, right, what are these thoroughfares. Then they have to install, right, at least 2 monitors on each heavy use thoroughfare. And then the year after, and kind of, I think, does it require yearly after that? Maybe not, but, oh yeah, after that, they have to report to the council and publicly make available the findings of all these air quality monitors. And then after that, kind of the future part is then working with, various city agencies to then create mitigation efforts, right? If we're finding certain streets have really high levels of dangerous air, dangerous toxins in the air, we have to figure out how we can stop that. And so, yeah, that's really, the bill. That's most of it. I think, for our office and in our district, we're supportive of it, and I think why a resolution would be great. Both, right, within all of District 1, we have the Brooklyn Bridge, Manhattan Bridge, Williamsburg Bridge, Holland Tunnel, FDR. So just like those by itself, right, we're getting a lot of cars and really no air quality monitoring. We're about to be, Michael, you know, surrounded by many different resiliency projects. I know on the east side, we have the ESCR, air quality has been a big concern there. And so I'm sure as the various resiliency projects kind of expand and are all start to happen, that's gonna be a concern as well. And kind of more citywide, I was talking with Councilmember Vilas's office, and there's an effort going on, I think, from the state, like it's a state-city collaboration, and it was called indirect source rule implementation, where there's basically it's the state, like DEC, so the Environmental Conservation, is trying to create it so that where a lot of warehouses have to kind of create air quality, like dangerous air quality mitigation efforts. And so, again, it's still very early phase stages, but kind of they're also viewing it as that's going to be happening in the next few years. It's helpful to have, you know, air quality monitors citywide, so we know, right, how these things are changing. And I think especially now about congestion pricing, as traffic patterns are going to change, it could be good to have air quality monitoring just to see, right, if certain areas are becoming, right, getting worse, getting better. Through that, so yeah, and I think, and you know, it has 40 council members signed on, which is basically the entire council. And so, yeah, I'm kind of surprised it's taken this long to get a hearing, but it's gonna have one. Again, I don't know what, you know, if the speaker will move it to pass afterwards, we'll kind of see, but yeah, that's really the basics of it. I'm happy to take any questions, and yeah, again, I can't promise I'll have answers to anything, but I can take anything back to Councilmember Vilas's team and yeah, kind of report back to you.
All right, so let's see questions in the room. Jeff?
I have a question about the definition of heavy use thoroughfare, this 100,000. Well, there's two, I guess, alternative definitions, either 100,000 vehicles or 50th percentile of the average New York City roadway corridor. I don't know what that means mathematically, but if it's the 50th percentile of the average, that would seem to me to mean that 75% of the roads in New York City would have monitors, which seems like an awful lot of monitors and quite an expensive endeavor, both in terms of equipment as well as in terms of just the people power required to analyze that data and do something with it. So first part of my question is, do you know what that means? And is it really the case that 75% of the roads would be contemplated to have monitors? Because I think that's too many.
That's a good question. So yeah, I'm not sure what that means. I can ask. Yeah, I can take that back and answer them.
Now, the 100,000, I have no sense of what that means. So I went to the New York Metropolitan Transportation Council website where they have some data. They don't, it wasn't easy to find data on individual roadways like Canal Street or anything like that, but they do have data for bridge crossings. And if I read it right, Brooklyn Bridge has more than 100,000 every day. And this standard is 100,000 over the course of a year, which once again suggests to me that a huge number of roads would have monitors. If you're talking about something that's like 1/300th of the Brooklyn Bridge traffic, that's.
Unless it's a typo. And they've lost 0.
Sarah?
I don't, it could be a typo, but this is the published legislation.
Yeah, I wouldn't say type of, but I would say to that where like a lot of streets would qualify, but I think that's why, right? I think it's right.
It seems like every street would qualify.
You take me like say right, Broadway is huge, right? So it could be right.
I have no problem with Broadway
Oh, yeah.
qualifying, but you know, how about 75th Street or South End Avenue?
Well, yeah, 75th Street, because right, so 75th Street is it's small, but it's fairly right.
But I
Two
guess,
intersections on 75th Street is actually
or,
right.
and at every school and playground. And so I guess what I'm questioning is, I mean, I'm a big fan of data. But obviously there are limited resources, both monetarily in terms of the personnel necessary to do something with the data. And maintain all of this equipment. And if there are tens of thousands of monitors around the city, that's maybe too many in terms of, I guess I'm questioning the definition of heavy use thoroughfare. I have no problem with Canal Street being monitored in any schools on Canal Street. That seems to be a no-brainer. Same thing with BQE and warehouses and all the things where it accords with common sense. But if every single street in Manhattan is going to have a monitor, that's tens of thousands of monitors. I mean, well, maybe not tens of thousands, but thousands of monitors. And it seems like that's not necessary and quite expensive.
Point is well taken.
No, no,
Well,
yeah, I'll take, yeah.
So some clarification of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, because I actually did think it was a typo.
Okay, no, yeah, so
Maybe it's 100,000 a day over, annualized over a year. I don't know. That would be a heavy use.
right, yeah, that, I asked them for, because I'd spoken to Alice a bit before, she had asked for some other data that I had asked for. And they didn't, yeah, her office didn't have, because I think, yeah, so I'll check on that
Yeah.
as well. Yeah, that might be the kind of thing where it's, yeah, it could be like, right, if the borough president, Antonio Reynoso back in 2018 might have done some study, but that might not have been translated over to her office, but yeah, that's a good point.
And I'm not an expert on this data at all. I just spent 5 minutes on this website and maybe I misunderstood it, but if I understood the Excel table correctly, Brooklyn Bridge has 128,000 vehicles every workday. So,
Feels like it.
and it feels like it too, but.
Okay, yeah, good point. And any other questions in the room, Michael?
One of the major polluters is on the water, the diesel that comes out of the ferry boats and the party boats. That's not a roadway, or is it?
Yeah, that's a good, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, then maybe, yeah, that might take other legislation too, then, I
Yeah.
can look into that. Yeah, I know. Yeah, especially right if Blue Highway is gonna be like a phrase we're using, that should be.
Yeah, I would like, to see receptors.
At ferry terminal,
Ferry
Yeah.
terminals, for example.
Yes, does this come, so once it's set, every year they're gonna reanalyze all the thoroughfares because it can change, like the street can suddenly become a thoroughfare, so does this contemplate that?
That's, yeah, that's a little, yeah, that's one
A
thing.
little unclear, right?
Too, yeah, it's a
Yeah.
little unclear how often this is being, yeah, kind of reevaluated.
You know, and so and will the monitors be available publicly?
Well, yeah, it said, yeah.
Okay, so we can all access.
Available, yeah, on the department's website, so that part I think it would be public.
Real-time monitoring, like purple air monitors or no?
That, yeah, it doesn't say.
It doesn't say.
I would assume not, just because generally they don't like to do the real time stuff, but I mean, that could be a thing that gets pushed for later, like during implementation.
And then maybe they can, maybe like you say, the waterways, but I'm also concerned about air quality in the subways too.
Yeah.
Eventually they should probably examine
Yeah.
what the air quality is like in the subways.
I remember there was some discussion of that somewhere, I don't remember what it was, I can.
Okay, thanks.
Any? No, I don't see any questions online. I'm curious, Max, do you know why the bill didn't pass previously?
I don't, I mean, it could be, like, I looked at, like, this one has 40 council members on, when it was, in the previous council, it was only 5. So it could be it just wasn't a priority for him and he didn't really try as hard. Yeah, I'm not sure, yeah, I think, yeah, from when, yeah, just based on, again, the short conversation I had, it seemed like there wasn't much communication between Aviles' team and Reynoso's team, like, when they kind of took it, I think they just, like, yeah, kind of the way it works on the council side is, there's basically just like a pool of bills and it's kind of first come, first served, so she might have seen it and just taken it and really worked with his office or discussed it with him.
And if I understood, just to be clear, when is the first time mitigation, when is the first time data would be available and then the first time mitigation would have to be implemented?
Yeah, so again, because the timeline, it was introduced in 2022. So if we're gonna, let's say it was happening now in 25. So right by by the end of this year is when, right, if it were to pass, let's say, this month, by the end of 2025 is when they would have to designate the heavy use thoroughfares. By December of 26 is when they would have to install the monitors. And by the end of 27 is when they would have to start reporting things and putting them online. So again, it could happen before that, but that's just, yeah, kind of.
And is there a reason it's that length of time? That seems like an enormous length of time. Maybe not the first part, but by the time we get data and mitigation, that's a long way down the road.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's,
Particularly in the face of congestion pricing and the issues that that's raising.
yeah, I mean, like definitely, having these 1 or 2 year kind of, I guess it's pretty standard for a lot of council bills, I know, like they do like to, at least especially in the first draft of it, because again, it's definitely gonna have to be amended, we will change the dates. They will sometimes change it to kind of more accurately reflect what could happen. But yeah, it definitely is a long time. I assume it's the kind of thing where kind of, as you're saying, it's gonna require a lot to set this up, so they wanna be generous to give the agency.
Well, also, things like air quality, there's a seasonal aspect to it, so you'd probably
Yeah,
want to have a calendar year to see, because things may be worse. I mean, the winter time, there's not as much humidity, summertime, there can be smog, I mean,
Less cars in
Yeah.
the summer too.
I'm just wondering from DEP's point of view, is funding available for this?
that's what we would at the hearing.
Because, you know, you really, imagine a website that was so, that's a word, strong, for example, that where you could find all of this information in real time. Imagine what that would cost to build that kind of a.
that's probably why they don't, I mean, it doesn't specify real time, it
Yeah,
specifies.
His point of view, and then,
Yeah.
you know, someone's got to monitor that.
Yeah,
And then the other question is, what's the mitigation that DEP is gonna order? Yeah, how can, DEP doesn't generally order mitigation.
yeah, well, yeah, so the mitigation is working with different agencies, I think that probably,
Mhm.
but no, yeah, I think, you know, that's, at the hearing, we'll figure out, you know, hear their perspective. I know, yeah, I mean, there was, like, DP was supposed to do, or the noise monitoring, and they were supportive of that. So maybe they'd be supportive of this, but we'll see at the hearing.
So we don't know where the administration is at as far as this is.
Yeah, that's kind of the hearing, I mean, yeah, generally when we find out, at least we would, maybe, you know, the council review team heard. Yeah, it sounded like they hadn't had much conversation with DEP about it yet, which is normal.
Okay. Any other questions? Concerns? So what's the sense of the committee about a resolution?
I think it's a good idea to get data.
Yes.
I have a concern about, well, I raised these definitions of what a heavy use thoroughfare actually means. I don't think it's likely to be a good use of resources for 75% of the streets of New York City to have at least 2 monitors. I mean, I think that would be horrendously expensive and likely not necessary to accomplish the purpose that they're trying to accomplish. I don't know what that translates to in terms of a resolution, if that concern were to be addressed in the resolution. But I certainly want clarification, you know, subject to supportive, subject to clarification on what does 50th percentile of the average roadway mean? Kind of mathematically, it sounds like 75% of the roads would have air monitors, which seems not appropriate. And similarly, this 100,000 vehicles, I have to understand what that means. If it is true that the Brooklyn Bridge gets over 100,000 every single day, then it would seem that almost every street in New York City would have over 100,000 over the course of a year. And once again, I don't think it's appropriate to have a monitor on every single street in New York City. And that can't be what this means. I mean, it's called heavy use thoroughfare. So maybe either I'm misunderstanding the data or there's a typo in here, and what they mean is 100,000 daily measured on an average, an annualized basis.
So
And that would sound like a heavy use thoroughfare to me, if that's what it is.
So I'm thinking that it's premature to do a resolution because so many terms are undefined. And I also don't know, again, what they would do about the data. We don't have any sense of really, I mean, yes, they may take care of it, they may take care of it, someone may take care of it, but we don't have any concrete understanding of who will be mitigating and how the mitigation will take place. I understand that there's a lot of pollution. I understand that people are starting to mitigate in different ways, but I don't know, the expense factor was raised. it seems like it could be, way bigger than this piece of paper. Could turn out to be a huge undertaking, and I don't think we have enough understanding of it.
Other thoughts?
I think it's too informed. I agree with you. I think the concept is very good and it needs to be tightened a great deal. And if all these questions could be answered and put together in something tighter to really explain what their intent is, then it would be something just.
So we'd all be supportive. Militantly supportive.
I mean, I think a little differently in that I think it's always a good step to collect data. And the first thing we need to do is to get to that point where we're collecting data. I mean, maybe if we did a resolution, we could discuss about, we can put in it what we would want actionable items that occur with that data. But I think it's important to like collect the data.
Maybe each community would specify where we want the monitors.
Do you feel qualified to do that? Across the whole city?
Or even here? District, sure,
CV1.
sure. I feel qualified to do that.
My concern is that we either overstate or even worse, understate where they should be doing that. What if what about a resolution in which we support the concept generally? Say this is the right direction, without this language exactly, the right direction to go, to seek to identify areas where air pollution is problematic and seek to get mitigation for it. And without approving or supporting the specific bills subject to these questions, and these concerns. Is that something that the community, that the,
No, I think you need to
Support?
engage DEP in this conversation because they're the ones who are gonna implement this. They're really the experts.
I mean, I kind of, Richard, I kind of support what you were saying. I agree with Vera that collecting data, I mean, lots of times policy decisions are made in the absence of data and, or they're put off and never made because they complain they don't have data. And so I think it is valuable to get data. I am concerned about overkill, and I don't think 75% of the streets should have an air monitor. But I think it would be useful to have air monitors outside the Holland Tunnel or on Canal Street or at the ferry terminals or whatever. And I think it would be helpful as congestion pricing proceeds to find out whether it's actually improving or not. It's not only this kind of data is useful not only for identifying problems that need to be mitigated, but also to identify things that might actually be working over time. So, Richard, your sort of formulation of a resolution is something I think I could support.
so I'm kind of thinking like, we support the objective of air quality monitoring on heavy use. What's the language here? Heavy
Thoroughfares.
use thoroughfares. And possibly even other, Michael, you raised the point of
Yeah, ferry
I-
terminal.
waterfront.
And subways are really, subways are important.
And
Because
other.
for so many of us
other-
are using more subways now, and we need to know.
Transportation nodes.
we
Yeah,
need
other
to-
transportation nodes, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, after all, I mentioned the warehouses, that's not necessarily a heavy use thoroughfare, but it's
Transportation.
it's a node that may very well need monitoring.
So we can decide how we wanna die, by plane, by subway, by waterway, sorry.
It's good to have choices.
Requirements
It's just.
for mitigation. So I would say, public access to the information and requirements for mitigation. How would we say the specifics of we're not prepared to support the specifics of how it's to be implemented at this stage? What's a good language for that section? So the first thing I'm saying is, we support the objective of air quality monitoring on heavy use thoroughfares and other possible affected transportation nodes public access to that information and requirements for mitigating action.
Mhm.
So that's sort of the general, now what are we saying we're not supporting here?
Well, we have questions about the definition in the legislation of heavy use thoroughfare. And in particular, the meaning of 50th percentile of the average New York City roadway corridor. We don't understand what that means, but it appears to say that 75% of the roadways would be monitored, which we are concerned may be excessive. Similarly, the 100,000 vehicle annually appears to be an inappropriate standard, given that, for example, the Brooklyn Bridge sees over 100,000 vehicles per weekday, according to the New York Metropolitan Transportation.
I got 107,000.
Pardon?
I just looked it up, 107,000.
107. All right.
Well, it's only the winter. I know the other thing is, how much are these going to cost? Is it going to bankrupt the city?
That's a good, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
Well, yeah, we
if
would like
we're
to
gonna have
see.
100,000 monitors,
Yeah, they're actually.
how much are they?
I mean, DEP needs a lot more money to do this.
We need a lot more information.
They're completely underfunded right now for their mission.
Yeah,
Yeah, there is, currently, again, this is kind of a side note, but yeah, there is an effort to get the council the resources to do fiscal impact statements for every bill before the hearing. Because generally, the way it works now is, yeah, the bills are in, but there's no actual way to get the money questions, but I think, yeah, that is a thing moving forward, we'll hopefully be able to get for these things.
Wasn't that one of the ballot propositions that won?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, it
Yeah,
did.
yeah. Which I think is a good idea, because
Yeah, I didn't
You know,
files.
the DEP has limited resources, and we want them to do all sorts of things, and we don't want to give them unfunded mandates so that they then pick and choose which ones they want to do. That's not a necessity.
So here's some other possible, so we could follow that by saying, the committee or the board, I don't know what the language is, the committee has questions about the definition of heavy use thoroughfares, the definition and lack of clarity. Heavy use of the term heavy use thoroughfares and concerns about the required number and cost of the resulting number of monitors and mitigating actions. Does that sound
Yeah.
close anyway?
Close enough.
Yeah,
Reasonably close?
yeah, yeah.
is it,
We-
I'm sorry, is it just assumed that DOT is gonna take this on? Or does it have to be stated that
Or you're saying with DEP taking it on?
whoever?
I mean, if the council votes for it, the administration has to take it on. I mean, it's a requirement. Am
So
I
you
correct
can't
about
just
that?
assign to the city and.
Oh, yeah, so
the
kind of the way-
appropriate-
But yeah, the way it works, because this is like amending a specific portion of the administrative code. And so yeah, a lot of the legislation don't always say which agency it's going to, but when you look at the administrative code, that's the administrative code for DEP. So it is going like to DEP kind of naturally that way.
And also how they reassess the thoroughfare.
So
Is that on
what's the
an annual
question of
basis?
that specifically?
Well, the legislation contemplates, I think, a single
Just one time.
designation
Right.
of, a one-time designation of these thoroughfares based on this criteria. It appears to contemplate then monitors would be put in, and those monitors would be reported on annually. As I understand, Vera, your concern is that, especially with congestion pricing going in right now, it's hard to predict what the roadways are going to be in future years. And you certainly, there's been a lot of concern that all of a sudden, a lot of roads are going to be congested that weren't congested before, and vice versa. And so I guess the concern is there should be a reevaluation or a redesignation periodically of what constitutes a heavy use thoroughfare for the purpose of installing monitors.
Couldn't have said it better. Thank you, Jeff.
It's a lot of words though.
Well, that's what I meant.
Oh, good.
Placement.
It's a periodic reassessment of what it's.
So, so we would request, the incorporation of a periodic reassessment, and potential redeployment of the monitors, of the location of the monitors.
Yes.
Okay, I'll be able to read this writing afterwards, I'm not sure.
We do.
So, we vote on this, yes? Is there a motion to approve it? Do we need to have the full language spelled out? Or is this close enough and we'll work it through based on these?
Yeah,
Based on this
that's pretty
reading?
general.
It's close.
I think it's close
Good
enough.
enough?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
We'll just complain bitterly at the full meeting about the.
Please.
About where it is,
Literally.
temporary chair and the inadequacy. How dare they put that guy up there? So is there a motion?
I so move.
I second.
Is there a second? Unfortunately, you missed most of the discussion.
I'm gonna abstain.
Okay,
Were you Ursha?
Meg.
Okay.
so John is still on. So we have a motion and a second. We should have a quorum. So let us, let's, your ayes here.
Aye.
Aye in
Aye.
favor. Let's count.
Aye.
6.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay.
Okay, are there any?
I have to recuse myself. My son works for DEP.
Well, maybe if you voted, that would require DEP, no. Are there any nays? Seeing none, any abstentions? Kennedy abstains. Any recusals? Michael Kramer recuses. Motion passes. I thank you all.
Thank you.
And thank you, Matt.
Thank you much.
Is there any,
Yeah.
I know you can't believe the meeting is over, so we could just sit here and chat, or is there a motion to adjourn?
I move
Yes.
to adjourn.
What happened to Fire IC work?
I think that was postponed.
Oh, man.
Oh, you came for that.
It was postponed.
I think Michael, I was wondering why you were here.
So the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I was wondering why you were here. Maybe you here.
It's gotta be.
I mean, honestly.
Yeah.
That's what I did.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I know.
So that Lucy can.
Oh, really?
That's cool.
I didn't know that. When did that happen?
Oh, no, she was on. Oh,
Thank you, everyone.
thank you.
Thanks, Les.
Oh.
Fantastic.
6.
All right, so the next step is, I guess,
What?
I'll-
Very proud. You know.
It's a big job.
Thank you for coming.
It would be.
That's why.
Probably
I'm good.
send it to Zach.
Yeah. And Alice.
Great.
Sing the meeting.
Within the fact.
I got to make policy.
Mm.